as your new and excitingly different Prime Minister, I'd just like to say, I am my own man. I am my own man. I am my
oh dear,
own man.
He keeps jamming.
I am my own man.
The press cartoons could be cruel too.
The particular image that stuck was one by Steve Bell, the very radical cartoonist of The Guardian, by showing John Major with his underpants over his trousers. And they were M&S Airtex rather naff underpants. And these underpants became not just the image, but they were used as a shopping basket, as a parachute, as a doormat. They became the feature. And I think that John Major did not like that.
There's the same sort of thing with Times leader. I mean,
The Number 10 press office tried to shield the Prime Minister from the newspapers, but to no avail. It wasn't just cartoons. He was infuriated by articles in the daily papers, often, it seems, on quite trivial matters.
Mrs. Major came up to me and she said, can you persuade your successor to produce the press digest that you produced? I said, I don't have to, he does. But your husband doesn't read it. Your husband reads the papers. And of course he was, I think, far too concerned about what was appearing in the media. He was a sensitive man.
Perhaps up to a point. I was too sensitive about some of the things in the press. I'm happy to concede that. But the politicians who are said to have hides like rhinos and be utterly impervious to criticism, well, if they're not extinct, they're very rare. And I freely confess I wasn't amongst them.
After victory in the Gulf War, some of John Major's colleagues urged him to go to the country, taking advantage of his popularity. The Prime Minister rejected this and held on for another year. In that time, he set in place his main policies, the Citizens' Charter and Europe, where he negotiated the Maastricht Treaty. In the spring of 1992, however, he could delay no longer and called the election for the 9th of April. John Major always loved campaigning, even when the prospects were not good, as they were not in '92. Polls at the start of the campaign showed the party behind Labour under Neil Kinnock.
All of us were slipstreaming in John's affair with the electorate. I think it was the extent to which the electorate trusted John and didn't trust Neil Kinnock that determined the outcome of the election. It was as simple as that.
The Prime Minister fought the election on the issue of Labour's plans to tax and spend and his own pledge to cut taxes. It was a campaign which would come to haunt him in the next Parliament. As it got underway, John Major became impatient with its many staged events and grandiose settings.
Well, I hope you like the set.
There was a lot of criticism that the campaign was staged and slow and ponderous, and he wasn't getting through and all the rest of it. And that was frustrating him, and he was getting very ratty. And he said, look, tomorrow, I don't care what anyone thinks, I am going to get up on a soapbox. It's how I used to do it. It was when he was 60 on a street corner in Brixton, he would get up on a soapbox. It's a rather odd way for a teenager to spend his Saturday afternoons. That's what I want to do.
I thoroughly enjoyed it. I felt at ease with it. I thought it was electioneering as it should be. And the public patently liked it. Even those who were not on our side enjoyed heckling, and I didn't mind that.
And the Liberals, quite right, and the Liberals.
And it was a real contact. It was what elections ought to be about. And I felt for the first time we had put the media to one side and had direct contact with the electorate as a whole.
But the media loved it. The television pictures of John Major on his soapbox, slugging it out with the voters of Luton, remain the abiding image of the '92 election campaign. The angry throngs, impromptu speeches and rotten eggs were in sharp contrast to Labour's more presidential-style campaign. The soapbox may not have been the deciding factor in the election, but it became forever associated with John Major's personal style. Polling took place on the 9th of April. John Major went to vote at Huntingdon, confident of victory. Many of his colleagues were less optimistic.
as the election went on, I became more pessimistic, and I remember going to my count thinking, well, there we are going to lose, and thinking it was pretty surprising that I ever expected we could win when we'd been 13 years in office and we were in the middle of a deep recession, which we were. How on earth could a government get re-elected in those circumstances?
Major John, 48,000.
John Major remained resolutely confident of victory, despite poor polls throughout the campaign. When the results of voting came through, he was vindicated. That night he went to celebrate his triumph with the party faithful at Conservative Central Office.
We had won the election that everyone had said was unwinnable. We had polled more votes in that general election than any political party before or since has ever polled in a general election. And yet we had a tiny majority of seats. And even then I could begin to see that life in a fifth consecutive Conservative Parliament would be life in very uncharted waters indeed.
John Major's majority, only 21, was too small to give him the authority he so desperately needed. In the months and years to come, battles over Europe, conflict with Mrs. Thatcher, and above all the sterling crisis of Black Wednesday, would test him and his party to the point of destruction. It would never be glad, confident morning again.